Do you recognize this image? Many children and adults already know the dream of visiting this castle. If you want to visit the castle that inspired this fantasy, it's also possible. It exists in Germany, in the Old Kingdom of Bavaria. And the castle itself is not that old. This wonder was built by a real king in the second half of the 19th century. This king, tall, standing 190 m, slim and handsome, very much resembling the kings from fairy tales, built this castle only for himself and did not want anyone else to enter his fortress. His passion was for beauty, music, poetry, and the heroes of medieval times. Unfortunately, this king did not live to see his work completed and could only sleep in his beautiful castle for a few nights. Ironically, Neuschwanstein Castle is nowadays one of the most visited castles in Germany. Today, we will learn about the story of King Ludwig II of Bavaria, also known as the Mad King, the Swan King, or the Fairy Tale King. Ludwig became known for his eccentricities. He was hated by his ministers and loved by the people. He had a great passion for the arts and architecture. During his life, he planned and executed the construction of several architectural works that today are major tourist attractions in Bavaria. He is remembered for his strange personality and unusual behavior for a traditional monarch, thus being a true mystery to historians. Moreover, his tragic death under strange circumstances has never been fully clarified. Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm of Wittelsbach was born on August 5, 1845, at Nymphenburg Palace in Munich, in the Kingdom of Bavaria. The prince was the son of King Maximilian II and his wife, Maria of Prussia. The couple had 2 children, with Ludwig being the eldest. His paternal grandfather, Ludwig I, insisted that he be named Ludwig because they were born on the same day, St. Ludwig's Day, the patron saint of Bavaria. His grandfather was determined to be his godfather and said the following words to his grandson, Ludwig II. Remember, only one who knows how to govern himself can be a true ruler. Make others happy and be happy with that. And let your love be a fire that warms your people. When he was only 8 months old, he became very ill after the sudden death of his wet nurse. The young Ludwig refused to eat but gradually recovered. His parents, King Maximilian II and Maria of Prussia, were very distant from their children, who were mainly raised by tutors and governors. There was one governess in particular whom Ludwig adored, named Sibylle Milhaus, who took care of him from 1846 until he turned 19. He affectionately called her Millau, and they continued to stay in touch until her death in 1881. By then, Ludwig was already king and deeply mourned the loss of his beloved governess, commissioning a beautiful monument on her grave as a gesture of love and gratitude. Ludwig received a very strict and comprehensive education. He studied history, art, literature, natural sciences, horseback riding, fencing, dance, and handling firearms. These were skills his parents deemed necessary to make him a good monarch. However, the prince did not enjoy this stressful, regimented life. To escape the pressure, he turned to painting and literature. Over time, Ludwig became a melancholic, solitary, whimsical, introverted, and very sensitive boy. Although his childhood was marked by demands and stress, there were moments of joy. Ludwig spent much time at Hohenschwangau Castle, which had been built by his father on the ruins of an old castle. The castle was filled with paintings depicting medieval legends, such as King Arthur, the Knight Percival, and his son, the Knight Lohengrin, as well as other Germanic legends. Hohenschwangau was the royal family's official summer residence, and Ludwig would spend hours observing these paintings, letting his imagination create stories based on them. From a young age, Ludwig developed a passion for theater. He organized many plays and performances at the castle, involving neighboring children and the castle servants. During his adolescence, he formed a strong friendship with Paul von Thurn Taxis. Together, they rode horses and shared a love for poetry. However, this friendship quickly dissolved when Paul became engaged in 1866. Around the same time, Ludwig formed a lifelong friendship with his cousin, Elizabeth of Bavaria, better known as Sissi. They had many things in common, considered themselves soulmates, and adored each other. However, rumors soon spread that they were romantically involved. Historians deny this ever happened, but Ludwig was never understood by his father, King Maximilian II. On several occasions, Maximilian mocked Ludwig's sweetness and character. The relationship between father and son was quite cold and distant, with Maximilian even avoiding meetings and conversations with Ludwig. On March 10, 1864, King Maximilian II died after a sudden illness. Ludwig, who was 18 years old, was crowned Ludwig II, King of Bavaria, on the same day. He began his reign as a very popular monarch. He maintained the policies previously implemented by his father and introduced new economic and social measures. However, Ludwig believed his main mission as king was to foster the arts and culture. Despite his popularity, the young king disliked the traditional public events for monarchs and, even more so, the administrative duties of the kingdom, which he frequently left in the hands of his ministers. He preferred to stay locked up alone in a room, spending hours painting and drawing. Another of his peculiarities was that he liked to stroll through Bavaria, talking to the people and peasants, giving them expensive gifts. This made him extremely unpopular with his ministers, but on the other hand, loved by the people. To this day, he is remembered as a beloved king in Bavaria. His mother, Maria, was very concerned about this behavior, as he spent much time confined to his room. She tried several times to talk to him and convince him to change this behavior, but to no avail. Ludwig rarely left his room, and when he did, it was for government matters or to walk alone in the fields. In the early months of his reign, he invited the composer Richard Wagner to live at the court. He had admired him since adolescence. He sent his assistants to find the composer. Wagner could hardly believe this miracle, which would drastically change his life. The king's invitation came at just the right time, as Wagner, at that point, had many debts and was in hiding from several creditors. So much so that, just one day before receiving the king's invitation, he had sent a desperate plea for help to one of his friends. "I can't take it anymore, I must disappear. Can you help me?" A few days later, he sent the same friend a very different letter. "The young king is a wonderful gift from destiny. I love him as a master can love his disciple. He knows every detail of my works and writings. He is beautiful, intelligent, and daily conversations with him only increase my admiration." Ludwig decided to assume Wagner's enormous debts and finance several projects, which caused great discontent among his ministers, who thought Wagner was an opportunist. Ludwig invested a large sum of money in the composer. Together, the king and Wagner planned to build a music school in Munich and a new theater. A few days before the premiere of Tristan und Isolde, Ludwig was very anxious, but the result was magnificent and received a standing ovation. Some time later, the opera The Mastersingers of Nuremberg premiered. On this occasion, Ludwig II was so moved that he invited Wagner to the royal box. The composer received applause alongside the king, but the audience was outraged. They had never witnessed such a blatant breach of royal protocol, and this caused a huge stir. They disliked Wagner, finding him arrogant and extravagant. The press published scandalous articles about the composer and his works, which also tainted the king's image. A few months later, Ludwig II, under immense pressure from his ministers, had to send Wagner away from Bavaria. The king even considered abdicating the throne to follow Wagner, but the composer convinced him not to. In 1866, Ludwig suffered the greatest defeat of his life. Prussia defeated Austria, and from then on, Bavaria became dependent on Prussia for foreign policy. The king became a vassal of his Prussian uncle. One of the most interesting aspects of Ludwig's life was, without a doubt, his romantic life and his sexual orientation, especially as a king. After becoming monarch, he was subjected to great pressures. In 1867, Ludwig became engaged to his cousin Sophia Charlotte of Bavaria, the sister of his close friend Isabel. The couple bonded mainly due to their admiration and passion for Wagner's works, exchanging numerous letters about it. They also began preparing for a luxurious and splendid wedding, but Ludwig kept postponing the ceremony. In the end, the wedding was cancelled. In 1868, Sophie became engaged to Prince Ferdinand of Orleans. What surprised many was that Ludwig attended the wedding as a guest, showing that despite everything, they remained close friends. Being homosexual, he knew that this marriage would be very unhappy. Some historians believe that his first love was his childhood friend, Prince Paul of Thurn-und-Taxis, although his most famous romances were with the Hungarian Joseph Keynes or other theater actors. He wrote in his diary about his homosexual desires, knowing that he could never make this public. In fact, he lived in great torment, as he was also deeply Catholic and felt guilty for being attracted to other men. Additionally, the conservative society he lived in would never accept his condition. Since the creation of the German Empire, homosexuality had been considered a crime. These diaries and letters disappeared during World War II, but today there are some copies made at the time. Ludwig's love for art was not limited to theater, he also adored architecture. During his youth, he had the opportunity to visit several castles across Europe and was fascinated by the Palace of Versailles, which left a lasting impression on him. Ludwig too believed that the ideal government was the absolutist monarchy of King Louis XIV, the Sun King. But in his era, things were different. He could never establish such a government, as he was a constitutional monarch, a head of state with rights and duties, but little freedom of action. Thus, Ludwig created his own parallel universe, his fantasy world, where, far from reality, he could feel like a true and authentic king. He began using his own money to fulfill his dreams, especially in the construction of grand palaces. In 1869, he began the construction of Neuschwanstein Castle. The construction of this castle created many jobs for the poor population in the region. He also built the Herrenchiemsee Palace, a replica of Versailles, due to his great admiration for King Louis XIV of France. In addition, he had the Linderhof Palace built, which was the only architectural work that Ludwig II saw completed during his lifetime. He lived in this palace, which became his official residence, for 8 years. By around 1875, Ludwig II had begun to live at night and sleep during the day. He used the most advanced entertainment techniques, owning fantastic carriages and sleighs in which he rode at night, often in disguise, and he also asked his servants to disguise themselves. He had the Venus Grotto built at Linderhof Palace, a cave illuminated by electric lights, a cutting-edge technology at the time, where a shell-shaped boat was installed. In this grotto, there was an artificial lake with several swans that the king liked to feed. He imagined himself as the Night King or Moon King, and he visited Munich less and less. His ministers began to contemplate ways to depose him. His grand architectural works and private performances had caused him to amass enormous debts, and foreign banks began to issue embargo threats. The king continued to ignore these issues and did not react rationally to prevent the situation from worsening. It was at this moment that his opponents seized the opportunity to declare that the king was unfit to continue ruling. In one of their meetings, the ministers decided to get rid of Ludwig, announcing that he was insane, only building castles, sleeping during the day, and staying up all night while avoiding his duties. They prepared a medical examination certifying that the king was mad, even though no doctor had actually examined him. Finally, he was arrested on June 12, 1886, at Neuschwanstein Castle and confined to Berg Castle with a medical team watching him 24 hours a day. The day after his confinement, Ludwig went out around 6 p.m. for a walk, accompanied by his doctor, along the shores of Lake Starnberg. Since the doctor considered Ludwig to be calm, he granted his request to go out without an escort. They were last seen around 6:30 p.m. When they did not return at the scheduled time, a search was initiated. First, the king's coat was found a few meters from the lake shore. Shortly after, the bodies of Ludwig and the doctor were discovered. At first, it was believed to be an accidental death, but this theory made no sense as they were not in deep waters, and the king was an excellent swimmer. There are several versions of Ludwig II's death and that of his psychiatrist. Some say the king entered the lake to commit suicide and the doctor tried to stop him, drowning in the process. Another version suggests that men appeared and murdered the king to ensure he could not return to power, killing the doctor to silence him. Many witnesses reported hearing gunshots that night. In the end, the official cause of death was declared as suicide by drowning. Ludwig II died in that lake at the age of 40 and had a funeral with all the pomp and honor of a monarch, lasting 3 days. Although the church forbids funerals with honors for suicides, it made an exception, arguing that Ludwig was insane and did not know what he was doing. His remains rest in the Church of St. Michael in Munich. What truly happened on that day remains uncertain, and the only sure thing is that the lake has kept the mystery of King Ludwig II's death for over 135 years.